This is Bay Radio.
So almost at the end of May, and it seems a long time ago now, that things have changed somewhat since we last caught up with Dr. Christoph Semler. He is in here live, and if you'd have come in a couple of months ago, dressed as you are, it would have been very dramatic and I'd have been taken aback, but we're kind of used to seeing the masks, everything these days. Well, obvious question, how are you?
All right, I'm fine, no complaints.
Yeah? Okay, I mean, I watched our last, because I'm recording this again, first video I've made in a while.
You looked at last one.
I looked at the last one, and well, you weren't to know. I mean, when we spoke then, there were actually no active cases in Spain. It was starting to be talked about. I think one person had recovered, and there was someone on the Canaries or on the Balearics.
Yes, there was a tourist on the Canary Island, yeah, and on Mallorca as well, yes.
But how surprised have you been by how it's escalated and the measures taken as well?
Very surprised by how many people got ill with the illness. Very, very surprised. The measures I think the Spanish government took and are still taking are most appropriate. And I think they helped a lot to calm the situation down and reduce the number of patients and unfortunately also of those who died from the illness. They were severe and very restrictive, but I think it worked.
So you do agree with it, Jan, the
Yes.
lockdown measures? Because
Yes.
there are people, saying it was unnecessarily harsh and...
Well, they haven't been in Madrid, or they haven't been in Barcelona, or haven't been in La Rioja, or for example in Italy, in Bergamo. You could argue that the whole of Spain was put under severe restrictions for the benefit of maybe 3 or 4 foci, hotspots of the illness. But we don't know what would have happened if it hadn't been like that. I think it was appropriate to severely restrict the freedom of movement of us, really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the numbers have still been fairly high when you compare it, the rankings, if you like, for countries across the world.
Yes, because once the virus is there, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get rid of the virus. You can only slow down the rate of spread of it.
Okay, I mean, do you agree with the official figures? I mean, there's all sorts of people with their little conspiracy theories and the like, and whether things have been put on a death certificate as death from COVID-19 when it may not have been. Have you any knowledge of any of that?
I know that different countries count differently, numbers are gathered differently and published differently. What is defined one way in France is defined differently in Spain or in Germany or in the UK, I assume. That certainly is true. Also, there is a lag in gathering and publishing the data. Also, you don't always know with certainty what somebody died from. And whether you say, I'm sure it was a COVID-19 related illness, or it might have been some other infection that looked very similar, that is open.
Mm-hmm.
And it might, I don't think so, but in theory it is possible that you might be pushed one way or the other when you're not certain, when there's no hard proof.
Do you think before it really came to light and before we knew a lot more about it, that most people would have had it in like the new year and not realise, because everyone was wandering around, even myself, saying, I've got this cold thing, I can't shift it.
Well, we always get colds around New Year.
That but with those sort of symptoms. But there will have been cases, weren't there, I'm sure?
Yes, they found somebody, there's material in France from December of last year. They found the virus of ill people, not just a sample, but a sample of somebody who was ill in France from a cold in December of 2019, last year, before anything happened in China. So the virus, or before it got published in China, before it broke out badly in China. The virus must have traveled already at the end of last year from presumably China to Europe and other countries as well, no doubt. However, the Spanish government about 2 weeks ago published the first and quite well-designed survey of the degree of having been exposed to the illness, the prevalence in Spain, and it was really low, surprisingly low. Only 5% of, I think, 28,000 sampled human beings, with or without symptoms, just randomly picked. Only 5% show sign of having had the virus, which is really low and much, much less than was expected. Which means the virus is not really so far spread amongst us. It was thought to be much higher.
Right. And what's been, I mean, there's not been any focus on, as much anyway, on the figures for, say, flu cases over the last, in flu season. How have they compared? Has there been any sort of confusion between the two?
There must have been, because initially Well, the flu season is usually end of January, February, tailing off in March. There is overlap. There has been overlap between flu season and the outbreak of COVID. At the beginning, there were no tests. And the tests that were there were not good, bad, in fact. They were a fraud. Of course, there will have been confusion about determining the cause of illness, whether it was the ordinary influenza virus or the new COVID thing. No doubt there was, yes. But there is, equally without doubt, an excess mortality. More people died than would be expected to have happened at that time, in that country, in that city, in that state. And that excess mortality is due to the COVID virus.
Yeah, it was unfortunate timing because it was just as before the lockdown that some of the big events started to take place, particularly in March.
Yes.
I know a lot of people are pointing at the Women's Day marches that were allowed to go ahead in the big cities, Madrid, even Valencia itself. I was there. Not on that, not really taking part in the women.
You tell me no.
I think it's been long enough. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I wasn't there for the Women's Day march. It was just a coincidence. But things like that, they did go ahead, and that's huge gatherings of people when it was really,
Yes,
probably
there were
in the
hundreds of
area.
thousands of people all stuck together in the middle of Madrid, and the government the organizers and those who gave permission are now being sued by the opposition parties because,
But it was nobody really knew, did they? It was. I mean, in the UK, there's probably no way they should have let the Cheltenham Festival go ahead, but that happened, and of course all those people then go off and
spread it around, no doubt. Yes, but there were people saying it should not be done already at the beginning of March, 5th or 8th of March, whenever that was. There already were concerns voiced that this should not happen. There was awareness of the risk involved in getting so many people together without any protection. The government did know, but I guess choose to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, is it one of those things where you get some of these things, from time to time, these, diseases, if you like, and they say, oh, it'll be all right. A little bit of complacency in there, perhaps.
I don't want to criticize anybody because this is a completely new situation. We had in 2007 or so, we had the SARS virus and we had the Middle East respiratory disease illness, which were well localized and didn't really affect us in Europe. And it was thought this will be similar. Unfortunately, it turned out it was not. But the degree of relaxedness about it, I think, was due to the experience from the 2 outbreaks before, which also came from China, which also involved animal-to-human transit of the virus, which also involved airway illnesses. I guess the thought was this is going to be equally easy on us as those other 2 illnesses, SARS and MERS.
What about your experiences locally? Because, when I asked you before, you hadn't seen anyone with potential symptoms. Nobody did have any. Have you come across many cases within your own practice even?
No, we haven't. Not any. Not one single. We have been testing now our patients for the last 2 weeks. We've got a blood test now available, and we have been testing patients for their antibodies. We've done maybe 15, 20 of those, and we have not found any single one patient who has developed antibodies against the COVID-19 virus. I've spoken to the laboratory, and they say that they might, out of anybody in Javea who has the test done, not only our surgery, but any doctor surgery, they might find 2 people in a working day positive for the antibodies.
Really?
Out of maybe a population we have now of 25 or 26,000. I also know from my colleagues that they haven't really for certain identified anybody who's got the illness. I also had occasion to talk to the undertaker, and even they only know of 3 people from Javea who passed away in the hospital in Denia positive for the virus, which means all in all, Javea is a good place to be. Not for that particular matter, for reasons of well-being and good health. Javea is a good place to be. And again, I think that is largely due to severe restrictions the government put into working at the outbreak of the illness, because people were not able to bring it to us.
Sure. Okay, I mean, obviously we're talking to people further outside of Javea, but the Valencia region as a whole hasn't fared too badly as far as numbers go.
The community as a whole, not. And again, Valencia, capital, much worse than any of the little villages. And our Marina Alta, even significantly less than other communities, mancomunidades in the Valencian community, where there is more population, more changeover of human beings, more economy running. Elche, for example, and Elda around Alicante were much worse hit because there simply is more interchange of human beings.
Yeah, I mean, and that was kind of the reason why it was held back, I think, in phase 0 for another week longer.
That shows it did work. Our government in Valencia is much more restrictive again as opposed to, for example, Madrid or Castilla-La Mancha, which is in between.
Yes, that was, but it should be that Monday the whole of the region goes through. Because part of it was held back. I think it was Alicante General Hospital and, as you mentioned, Elche. So it's getting everyone up to speed. So at least 2 weeks in phase 1 before it all moves on to phase 2. They have applied to do it, so it should get the decision this weekend. It's likely to happen from Monday, though. So things relax a little bit.
This is new times. We don't know how best to behave. It's an experiment to some extent. See what happens when you do this. See how far you can go without having another outbreak. I'm sure there will be more outbreaks. I'm sure once the borders will be open, once the tourists will come, once people from Madrid and from France and from Germany and from Holland and from Scandinavia will come, the numbers will rise again.
Yes, I did actually. I did some preparation for this. This is how seriously I've taken this. Unusual for me to do any prep, but I have just got one bullet point here. Second wave? ?
Yes, I'm sure it's going to happen. Undoubtedly, it must happen. The virus doesn't disappear. It's still there. Only doesn't spread as quickly. But it does not disappear out of the world. That will only happen either if everybody has had the infection, which is unlikely to occur, or once they've got the vaccine, which is something I'm really strongly looking forward to.
Yes, I mean, there's talk about the vaccine, whether it's a bit like the flu one changes every year, isn't it? Because things adapt, the virus adapts and mutates.
Yes.
Yeah. So will that be the same sort of thing?
One doesn't know.
We don't know, I suppose.
It will, no doubt, it will mutate, but most likely the mutations will not be so aggressive as the particular strain we've got at the moment. Let's have some optimism in that. But I think this is a particularly finely tuned virus against us human beings. And it's unlikely that the variation that will come of it will be equally aimed, by chance of course, not design, against us. The vaccine against the virus now will be good, and I'm sure that will be the big relief from this small nightmare.
Sure. I understand if you're not allowed to say, but do you have any sort of ideas or theories of where it originated from? Was there a leak somewhere? Or I mean, it's been around, hasn't it, the coronavirus, since maybe the 60s, or I read, or certainly longer than...
Oh, the coronavirus has been around forever, yes, but these are different strains.
But this particular strain, we pretty much we're sure that it's come out of China. But do you think there was a leak in a lab, or whatever's been...
Oh, yeah, the famous virological research station in Wuhan and the bad doctor.
And they didn't tell us,
They didn't tell us. No, but I read articles in the medical journals, and the biochemists and the geneticists, they say that this virus looks like a wild mutation and not something genetically engineered. That's their consensus. It might not be as satisfying as being able to point the finger at somebody, having to continue speculating about bats and funny little armadillos. But the way the research people look at it is they say this is just a chance mutation from an animal virus that suddenly found its way into our human body.
So we mentioned possibility of a second wave. Now, a lot of people are pointing to when it becomes winter again. But do you see, what about this theory of it not being able to deal with the heat very well, the virus, and it may see it killing it off a little bit? Obviously, in the coming months here in Spain, we're nearly there already.
Yes. Well, we have to see. I don't know whether this is...
I didn't know how scientific that was. It's a speculation that was...
Well, you would have to look at the countries that have got the summer just on at the moment. Okay, Australia is not spared of the illness. They had it coming slowly, but they've got the big numbers as well now. And they are we are heading into summer. They are coming...
They're heading into winter there, yeah.
Well, they're autumn, yes. And they've got it hot now, and they still got a fair number of cases.
Right.
I'm not sure the heat will protect us from it. What I would like to say is, where there are outbreaks, it usually boils down to people too closely together, literally opening their mouths wide. Singing in particular in choirs has been found to be a hotspot for passing on the illness.
Wow.
Mouth wide open, singing at the top of your voice just releases so much particles in the air that people standing next to you inevitably will breathe it in when they take the next breath, which is what happens when people sing in groups.
Yeah.
That's something very important to keep in mind. It's fair enough to go out, but we should keep the distance from each other. We really ought to keep the mask on if we are in confined spaces. Restaurants also belong to that group. It's hard to find your way around there, but it is a confined space, and though they might only have 2 people on a table, you don't know how close the tables are and what the distance between the 2 people sitting on the table is. Obviously, you can't wear a mask in a restaurant. Well, not sensibly, though.
No, it was exempt from, because it's obligatory now to wear the mask where you can't keep the 2 metre distance.
Yes.
And you'll find most of the shops, even the bigger, big supermarkets, insist on it.
And it's very, very important. It's not silly. It's not superfluous. It's not exaggerating. The illness is spread through droplets in the air coming out of our mouths and noses.
Yeah.
Sneezing, coughing, shouting, singing. That's how they get literally thrown about. And that's how we inhale them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is why some of the theatre and entertainment industry has been hit and it's shut down, because they
Cinemas,
do those close. There's an episode of Friends, I don't know whether you've seen it, with it's Gary Oldman appearing in it with Joey, and he really spits. He says, you're not acting properly in these scenes unless you really spit it in their face. And obviously that's exactly the thing. We know how it's spread, and that is it. So
you have to be careful. It pays off to be careful. I really strongly suggest that we wear our masks, particularly when we are inside a building where there are many people about.
Mm-hmm. Well, anything else you wanted to add while you're here?
Wash your hands and keep your mouth shut.
That's right, yeah. No singing and no fun at all, in fact.
By yourself. In the shower, you can sing, yes.
All right. So, well, it's good of you to give up your time to come in. Obviously, a busy chap.
Yes, I heard back now.
Thanks a lot.
Lovely,
See you soon.
Lovely. Adios.